We are storytellers by nature, sharing with others what we experience, perceive, and believe of life, our joys, adventures, our losses. We tell ourselves stories as well. Some leave us trapped by false beliefs and self-doubt. But there are also stories of persisting, exploring, and rising above. Stories of uncovering the truth, enabling powerful transformation and triumph. These are those stories. These are your stories. Hello, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Zoe DeMuro. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a spiritual counselor, religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, and a transformational coach. My ministry and my mission are to help people co-create their most authentic and most fulfilling life experience. And today, it's my honor to bring you this show entitled, "And So It Is." Stories of truth, transformation, and triumph. We are here the first Saturday of each month, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. If this is your first time, it's great to have you here. If you're returning, welcome back. You know, in each episode of this show, we'll hear how people like you, like me, who've been held back by false and limiting beliefs, how we've uncovered our truth, enabling us to transform our life experience and then triumph because of that spiritual journey. So, without further ado, I would like to actually find the correct notes so that I'm saying the right thing at the right time here. Okay, yeah. Here we go. I am absolutely excited for my next guest, because he demonstrates just how well the principles and the tenets of New Thought translate into everyday life, regardless of your spiritual affiliation. So let me tell you a bit about my guest, Mr. Buck Austin. Buck is a financial education and coaching professional in Oakland, but his real calling is making a difference. Whether he's supporting unhoused neighbors through grassroots outreach, or he's helping to build children's libraries halfway around the world, Buck brings heart, hustle, and humanity to everything he does. Well, I probably need to get Buck on camera here before I go through the whole hour just talking about him. So here is our guest today, Mr. Buck Austin.
Hi, Zoe. How are you?
I am wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on your show today. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, pleasure. Absolutely. So, ready to dive in?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what we should like to start with is to get an understanding of just where we are coming from. Where does your story start? When does it start? All right. Give us enough background so we understand where your origin is in this story.
Yeah. So I trace it back to growing up in Iowa. I think that was really formative for me. Of course, as a young person, grew up in a very rural area, 8 miles from the nearest town, farming country. And my parents worked very hard. And so I was alone a lot, and I was reading or watching TV by myself. I have a sister, but we were 6 years apart. And so we were kind of doing our own thing each. And just as a result, was very introverted as a kid, had friends in school, but just was very much kind of a keep to myself, looking inward, introspective kind of person. And that continued on through college. Got through college, wouldn't really talk to anybody unless I knew you already, unless I'd been introduced to you. And, just didn't have a lot of confidence. Was very shy and didn't really kind of have a lot of that go-getter attitude. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Didn't really, have a lot of what I felt like was this ambition that I was seeing in other people. And so I felt like that really kind of was the person I was for the probably first 24 years of my life. And,
Now, considering what I know about you now, all right, what is it that beginning got you to believe, right? Because clearly you were very limited. So what was it that brought that about?
I think the belief I had was that other people are the ones who do things. I had this, I guess, this attitude that I was just kind of going to be on the sidelines and watching everything else happen, because that was kind of my experience growing up. And I think that was the limiting belief that I had, was that other people are the ones who do things. Other people accomplish things. I'm okay with just, it's fine to just kind of sit back and watch the world go by. And I don't think that was really a comfortable thing or what I ultimately wanted, but I think there was a lot of fear there that I had as a young person. And I think it held me back in a lot of ways. I look back, especially on my college experience, and I thought, wow, there's so many things I could have been involved in, could have taken advantage of, but just didn't feel like I had the courage to do it.
What do you think the fear was? I mean, what were you afraid would happen or wouldn't happen?
I think it was a fear of being embarrassed, being humiliated, which of course I can look back on now and see how irrational that was, or how silly that was, because that's life. You take chances, you try things, some things don't work, maybe some things might be awkward, but I just remember being really, really afraid of sort of awkward situations and how that might make me look.
Now, you and I grew up in very different environments. I grew up in New York City.
Yeah.
About as urban as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
And yours was significantly not urban.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It was, like I said, the nearest town was 8 miles away, surrounded by cornfields, lots of cows, lots of pigs. Yeah. And I do feel like that played a big role in who I was. I wasn't a social kid because there weren't a lot of other people my age around. I had one friend who lived maybe a couple miles away, who I would see occasionally. We'd ride our bikes to each other's house, and play together. But I didn't really have that kind of experience that a lot of kids have, where, you've got your best friend, 2 houses over, and there's all these other kids that you get together and play with. I was just kind of like, my role as a kid, what I was kind of encouraged to do is just entertain yourself. Find a book, read that. That's one thing I do look back on fondly, is that my family was very much into reading and very much encouraged that. And so that was a good thing, but at the same time wasn't necessarily the best for my social skills or learning how to interact with people, that kind of thing.
Okay. So now that you are thinking about this, and you've gotten out of that environment and you've gone to school, where did you go to college?
University of Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah, so close to where I grew up.
So how did that change things for you?
Going to the University of Iowa? Not a lot, to be honest with you. Like that wasn't a transformational experience for me. I feel like it could have been, but I don't feel like I was in a headspace really to take advantage of everything that was there. I talked to people about their college experience, and I did this internship and I got involved in this club and I did all these things. And I did meet some people, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later, how that was part of the transformation, even though at the time I didn't know it. But I just kind of, again, was still keeping to myself, just kind of head down, do what I have to do, and not really doing a whole lot else. I was still very, very introverted. And then, so really it wasn't until after I got out of college and I moved to Colorado and ended up getting a job in an art gallery as a salesperson, through my biological dad. Got this job for me, which I was at the time I was probably the least likely person to be a salesperson. in the
I was going
world.
to say a sales job. Wow.
I
Well,
know.
someone who doesn't like to speak to people.
Right, exactly. And so that was kind of, it was being young and being broke and needing to have a job to live and not have to move back home. And so, that was a little bit of the start of it. It was like, okay, like I'm going to start talking to people, and because I have to, like, I need to make these commissions to make it work out here, and not be forced to move back to Iowa, which wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world, but wasn't what I was looking for
Mhm.
at that time. And so that was a little bit of it, and worked at this art gallery where the guy who ran the art gallery was just a really, really intelligent, really well-read, educated person. And I learned a lot from him. He would give these lectures on any topic that you wanted. We'd have these monthly employee meetings, and you could just name an artist, and he would give you a 45-minute lecture on that artist's significance to the art world and where they fit in the historical context. And I just thought, wow, this guy is amazing. I sought out mentorship from him, and he kind of took me under his wing. And so things were going fairly well at the art gallery. And then, long story short, turns out that he was selling forged art, fake art. And so I realized that's a felony. I don't want to be involved in a felony. Not something I'm, looking forward to. Not a career goal of mine. And so I just knew I had to get out of there and didn't know what I was going to do. I had an old college roommate from the University of Iowa who'd moved out to San Francisco, and he was a good friend. And so I just called him mostly to vent, mostly just to say, hey, I'm kind of freaked out right now. I'm involved in a bad situation. I need to get out of here. What are your thoughts? Like talk through this with me. Help me piece something together. And he said, well, if you can move out to San Francisco right now, we have a room in our apartment that just opened up, and I can get you a job working at the stock exchange. And I never, ever, ever thought of myself as a California person. Growing up in the rural Midwest, the idea of California seems A, very foreign, but then also B, just very different, let's say. It's how people in the Midwest would put it. Oh, that's different. With a strong subtext of like, aren't people out there pretty weird? Which, of course, those of us who've lived in California know that there's all kinds of people out here. But I didn't have a lot of other good options at the time. And so I just thought, well, okay, this is meant for me to give it a shot. And so I literally packed everything I owned into my car, got rid of a lot of stuff and just what would fit in my car for the drive out. Didn't have enough money for a hotel, so I drove 23 and a half hours straight from Boulder, Colorado to San Francisco, which, when you're 23 and a half years old, as I was at the time, you can do those kind of things. Now, no way, but lots of energy drinks and and lots of, like pulling over and doing sprints by the side of the road to keep myself awake. And then, made it to San Francisco, got the job at the stock exchange, started working there.
Okay, let me slow you down for a moment here.
Yeah.
Got a lot packed in.
Yeah.
So interesting geographical changes.
Yeah.
With each geographical change, you seem to be opening up more and more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was a big part of it for me, is just getting out and seeing more of the world. And again, it was that, that idea of things happen somewhere else. When I was growing up in Iowa, those people do that. I'm not the one who does those kind of things. And so, it was also a matter of building confidence. I mean, the move to Colorado in the first place, that was challenging. That was something that felt outside my comfort zone for sure. Moving out there and, starting something completely new. And, my biological dad lived out there, but other than him, I didn't have any contacts, didn't have any, real infrastructure out there. So, and I could see just kind of by happenstance, getting a job selling art, I was forced to talk to people. Getting the job in San Francisco at the stock exchange, was forced to be like very outgoing there, because it's the kind of environment where if you're not outspoken, you get trampled. And so yeah, it just kind of worked out that way. So it's something I do think about a lot, that process of kind of being exposed to these different things, and I guess just making those steps, having the courage to say, okay, I'm going to try this. I say courage, but at the same time, it was kind of being forced into those things in a way. I needed to have jobs to survive. And, those were the type of jobs where I had to be outspoken. I had to stick up for myself. And those were really the first times in my life that I was forced to do that. But it was getting out in the world and experiencing new things, challenging myself, stepping outside my comfort zone that put me on that path.
Now, you use the word forced, but personally, I think it's more like chose.
Yeah.
Because, think about it. How many people do you know who, when faced with a similar situation, just kind of sit back and say, well, universe has it out for me.
Yeah.
I thought this job was going to be great. Turns out not to be.
Right.
You chose to step up.
Yeah.
And each time that you made a move, it was interesting because your world seemed to expand.
Yeah.
With each of those moves. And what I find particularly fascinating about that is considering where you started,
yeah,
your ability to step into that larger circle, that greater view, and not hide.
Yeah.
Right. And not feel small. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, looking back on, you talk about transformation and you talk about sort of these false things that we believe about ourselves. I think looking back now, I can see that there was a strength there that I had. It wasn't necessarily very developed, or I wasn't very much in touch with it at the time, but it was there. And it was driving me to take these challenges. And it made me understand that ultimately I wanted more out of life. I had a lot of friends who, just went into farming or got a factory job or just kind of stayed close to home. And that's great for them. I think a lot of them are happy with that. And I knew that I wanted to see more. I wanted to do more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think looking back, I think I did have some strength there that even at the time, I don't think I would have labeled it as such. I think, I think I just would have said, oh, that's what I had to do. But I think it was there. I just needed to learn to tap into it and really embrace it and trust myself and believe in myself that I had the ability to do these things. And so then, moving to San Francisco, you talk about expanding your universe and then broadening your horizons. That was really, really that process for me writ large. It was just amazing because, I started to get interested in art, working at the art gallery, doing that kind of stuff. And then coming to San Francisco just felt like an explosion of creative energy around me. Just even, walking down the street and, seeing murals or seeing graffiti or, seeing the ads for the bands that were playing and really just wanting to, at first it was just wanting to soak all of that up just because it felt like something I hadn't been exposed to in the previous places I'd lived. There'd be a few concerts, there'd be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but there was just so much creative energy. And as a young person, that's really enticing and really just made me feel alive. Wow, there's all these things that I have to explore and that I want to check out. And then with time, it became something where I wanted to contribute to that. I was feeling, I think, building that confidence and like getting out into the world, trying new experiences and saying like, oh, it's okay to, you don't have to just sit back and kind of passively, engage with things. You can actually get out there and be a part of things. And, and so I got a journalism degree in college, and I thought, well, I have these writing skills. So I started a blog and started covering the local art and music and filmmaking scene in the Bay Area, and really enjoyed that. And that was another step in that process of sort of learning to become more extroverted. Because now I had an excuse to talk to people. I'm writing this story, so which made it so it was like, okay, well, I have these things that I want to talk to you about. And so it made it less scary for me, even though I can look back in some of those first interviews I did and just, being kind of terrified and having my list of 20 questions and just reading down the questions. There was one artist who I really loved. His name was Phil Frost. He's an artist from New York City. And I thought, he's probably not going to want to talk to me. He's kind of a big deal. I probably won't get this interview with him. And I just remember having my list of questions and just literally reading them off and doing this terrible interview with him. In the end, he kind of saved me because he, just kind of took it upon himself to launch into this really great story that ended up being the centerpiece of the article. But, it was one of those experiences where it's just learning experience. You try things. Some things work, some things don't. So I think that was doing the journalism, I think, was really helpful for me because it got me out of my shell, gave me this reason to talk to people. But then, just getting out there and being more engaged in the world in general, I think was really helpful.
How much did you look back and say, wow, look at how much I've changed? Or was that not in your mind at that time?
Yeah, I did think about it because I had my friend group. A lot of the people that were in my friend group in San Francisco were people that I'd gone to college with. And so they had noticed the change and were kind of astounded by it because they had seen just in a few years, just by sort of branching out and moving to a new place and trying new things, they had seen that transformation that I was undergoing at that time. And they just would say things like, wow, you are a different person than you were a few years ago. And so I was aware of it at the time. I think I would say that I still felt like I had some growing to do. So it felt like a process. It wasn't something where all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, I'm this whole new person and I'm complete and I'm self-actualized and I'm, all these things. It was an ongoing process. And I think really what I saw as the next stage, the next phase in my evolution as a person was I wanted to do something to help others. And, I was doing a little bit of that because the focus of what I was writing about was artists who were kind of under the radar, who weren't very exposed, but I felt like we're still doing great work. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it. You did kind of just helping these people along in their career, but it felt like I wanted to contribute more to the betterment of society. That might sound a little grandiose, but I knew that to really feel like I was doing what I wanted to be doing, I knew I needed to do something more to help others.
Well, I wouldn't worry about that feeling grandiose, considering that we in New Thought feel that what we do is help to change the world.
Yeah. And I mean, that was, it was a tough time in my 20s because yes, I was kind of coming out of my shell, but then I was having like I remember just kind of, I'd be riding the bus in San Francisco, riding the 5 bus or the 21 bus and just thinking, am I a good person? and not having an answer to that. And that felt very scary and uncomfortable. And it really, really plagued me, and I really didn't at the time. I was like, how do I answer that question? How do I feel better about, what I'm doing with my life? And so started looking for just what can I do? What can I, how can I contribute to something? And so I just started, curating art shows. I'd been doing that for a little bit. And then I just thought, well, what if I could curate art shows and then we could sell the art and use that to raise money for different causes? And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I can do this, and did it, and it had some success with that. And like, okay, that felt good. I really liked doing that. And then just kind of branched out from there. Just started organizing different events. Worked with an organization out of a nonprofit, an NGO out of Japan called Peace Boat, and organized an event for them. And yeah, I was like, oh wow, this is okay. Now I'm starting to feel like I'm doing something that's impacting things. And that was really, when we talk about transformation, that felt like, even though it was the beginning of a transformation, it felt like the transformation that I really needed to be making. Like coming out of my shell, being a little bit more outgoing. I think that was part of it, but I don't think it was at the heart of what I really needed to do to feel like I was more in my purpose. That was a word that once I started doing some of these things, organizing fundraisers and things like that, purpose was the word that really resonated in my mind a lot. I would think a lot about purpose, and I remember I would think, I'm in my purpose right now. I'm solidly in my purpose. It's well defined, and that was a really amazing feeling. That felt really, really wonderful, and really made me feel like, okay, I've got a reason for being in this world beyond just consuming resources and seeking pleasure and those kind of things. And so yeah, that was really a big step for me to start to have that realization.
And at what age?
So this would have started late 20s, early 30s.
That's rather incredible. I know so many people who are struggling with that exact question. What is my place in this world, in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s? And I don't know. Yeah, actually, I know a couple of people in their 80s as well.
Yeah. And I would say it's an ongoing process. And there's times where I felt like I've strayed from that and you lost focus on that and needed to kind of, in my own mind, center myself in that again, in that feeling of having purpose. And, in the intro, you talked a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing recently. And I had the good fortune to go to the Philippines in 2014 to do some disaster relief there. And that started the whole library building project. And that was, again, something that really helped me feel like, okay, now I'm back in that purpose mode again. I have that feeling once again that, okay, I'm doing something. And I think it was also, with that project, it was just organizing some book drives, organizing some fundraising, and just that idea that you can talk to a few people. And again, coming back to the idea of just being a little bit, outgoing and talking to people, and just a few conversations, and you can do some pretty wonderful things. And so just that idea of building community through just a few words, and understanding how many people there are out there that were just looking for something to contribute to, or you just kind of do a little bit of storytelling and they think, oh wow, yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm looking to help out with. So doing the library project in the Philippines, and we've created 10 libraries now for kids over there. And so that's been, again, it's that process, that ongoing, like, oh, okay, yeah, I can just look. I think I'm better about it now. I think I have it more solidly entrenched in my mind, but there have been times in my life where I did need to remind myself, like, you can do pretty small things that can have a pretty big impact for others.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely incredible that you're able to get so much of that done.
Yeah, and I really, have to. It's so much of the credit goes to others. I don't want to, make it seem like I'm the one, who's doing all the work. The folks in the Philippines, the NGO over there, they're tremendous, and it's that's also been a powerful lesson. It's like if you start to look, there's people out there doing things that you're going to want to contribute to, and
And
just I worked at a credit union previously, and just putting a post on the employee intranet, and the response was tremendous. And I think, one of the things I've also learned, I feel like over the years, is looking at the news. First of all, you can get really downhearted pretty quickly looking at the news. But then secondly, there's so many things going on. And I think a lot of us want to help and want to do something, want to have an impact in some way, but it seems too big. There's too many things. And how do I narrow it down? How do I focus on the way that I really want to help? And I think it was really helpful for me to understand, just pick something, like pick something that's close to your heart, but don't try to fix all the problems. Don't try to be the one who does everything. Pick one thing that's especially close to your heart, because that's what's going to help keep you motivated too. Because, a lot of times it's not a lot of heavy lifting, but there's maybe a lot of little tedious things that need to get done. And so education has always been really important for me. As I said, my family was really big on reading. So the idea of giving others the opportunity to read and study and learn, that's close to my heart. And so it's been something where it's truly been a labor of love, but it's just been so many people contributing to this in so many different ways. And yeah, it's I've always kind of looked at it. Maybe this is a little bit morbid, but I always kind of look at it in terms of being on my deathbed someday, whenever that comes, and just wanting to look back and think, yeah, I made a difference somehow, and that even since I was in my 20s, I thought about things that way. I wanted to have my life have some meaning. And when I'm doing these kind of things, I feel like, okay, yeah, I'm doing something, and not others may be doing more, but I'm doing something, and that feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when you talk about what I would refer to as sacred service,
Yeah.
right? What you're doing is you are taking your passion and you're joining to a cause.
Yeah.
And that is powerful. That is extremely powerful. A lot of times people feel they have to do something in order to feel valuable within themselves, and they just go and do something.
Yeah.
And that might help for a while, but if it's not something they enjoy, if it's not something that really speaks to them,
Yeah.
there's a very different vibe that happens with it.
Yeah.
We think of our body energies, and when your energy is in that state of flow with your purpose, your attention, all there, that's truly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a great example of that is I've been volunteering lately with an organization called Urban Compassion Project here in Oakland. And Vincent, who leads the project, along with another woman named Supriya. But Vincent was, he was on the streets, living on the streets. He was unhoused for, I believe, 23 years. He got out of prison and didn't really know what he was going to do with his life. And he was just kind of hanging out, and he was at a park and saw that a mother had brought her child to the park to play. And she said, "Oh, the park is too dirty. We can't play here." And so Vincent took it upon himself to clean up the park, just because he wanted those kids to have a place to play. And it's one of those things where I've been volunteering with them, and you can see the passion that he has. And, I got involved in it because I live in Oakland. I'm passionate about my city. and so I think a lot of times, people may think of like, oh, well, I give money to the Red Cross and I do this, and that's great. That's tremendous. But I think really for something to be sustainable and something that you're really going to put ongoing energy into and kind of put your heart into, it has to be something that really feels important to you. And like, to your point, that you really feel passionate about. And so, yeah, that's definitely something now. And, I think a driver behind my wanting to get involved with Urban Compassion Project was just seeing so little compassion in the world of politics. And, again, I can't solve that. I can't, there's no way I can, by myself impact how these politicians, think and feel and act. I can participate in things, protests and things like that. But it was just something where, okay, what can I do? How can I impact something? And so, yeah, I was lucky to find that opportunity as well, because it feels like, yeah, I can see the change that's happening. And I think that's important too, just to be able to, when with the libraries in the Philippines, I get the pictures of the kids when the books arrive, and see the smiles on their faces, and so I think it's important to be able to see the fruits of the labor.
Yeah, and to know that the impact just continues to ripple outward.
Yeah, exactly. In the Philippines right now, so the 10th library is actually the first one that we're building from the ground up. In the past, the libraries have always been in a school, in a community center, something of that nature. This is the first time that we're actually building a complete building. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this is that it's going to be a library, yes. And the kids there, there's no other access to a library that they can take part in. And so that's these kids getting an education so that they can get a good job, so that they can support their entire family. And you talk about ripple effects. So there's that aspect of it. It's also going to be daycare, where the moms in the neighborhood can drop their kids off in a safe place where there's people to look after them. And so then the moms can go off and work, and earn money for the family. So I love being a part of these projects where you can just see so many different things flowering out of it and flowering because of it. And yeah, it's really fun to think about just some of the things that can happen because of, again, just having a few conversations with people and getting involved. And yes, sure, I did fly to the Philippines, so that's a little bit more than having some conversations. But yeah, just kind of deciding to do something and get past some of those fears, that I might have had in the past. And it's the thing I found about that is the more that you kind of challenge these fears that you have or challenge these false assumptions, the easier it gets. You build some muscles, build some confidence. And yeah, I think that's really been something for me where just in my life in general, I like to challenge myself. I like to do things that maybe in the past I wouldn't have done and wouldn't think I could even do. And so I think when I feel the most alive is when I'm doing those kind of things, when I'm trying things that are outside my comfort zone. And I just, in the past, I would have thought, well, no, I can't do that. That's not in my wheelhouse.
When you say you feel most complete when you're involved in that way, thinking of the completeness in terms of your mind, your heart,
yeah,
spirit,
yeah,
all in alignment.
Yeah, and it feels like self-nurturing, and it feels like taking control of my life and feeding my happiness, my sense of fulfillment, my sense of purpose. And instead of like I was saying before, that feeling of being on the sidelines and things just happen to me, or things are done by other people, and just being out there and being active and doing things and trying to contribute in some way. some of those nagging questions of the past, like, what's my purpose? What am I doing here? What's the meaning of my life on this earth? I think those things fade away, when I'm at least out there contributing in some way. And so I think for my personal transformation, I think it's funny. I still have friends, who knew me when I was younger, and they've kind of seen the transformation, and we still talk about it, and I'm grateful that I've found that strength to make those changes, to be that kind of person who challenges myself and tries new things. And yeah, so I feel like I'm in such a better place now. I also feel like as a part of that process, I know myself better.
Hmm.
We talked earlier about like people not feeling like they don't know who they are. And there's things I've tried where I felt like, okay, well, yeah, that wasn't really what I wanted to be involved in, or didn't give me that feeling of, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing. But that's the process. You try things, and then eventually you find some things where you're like, okay, yeah, this is who I am. But it's a process of getting out there and exposing yourself to different things, I feel.
Yeah, I think one of the most courageous things that takes place with transformation is the ability to see yourself differently.
Yeah. And I think that impacts so many different areas of my life too. I think professionally it's impacted me, and just thinking in terms of like, oh yeah, I can, why not? Like this might be something that I hadn't been exposed to in the past, or kind of work I haven't done in the past, but hey, I can learn it. I can take on this kind of stretch goal, as they say, and accomplish things that maybe I didn't think I could. And so I think there's a confidence building that comes with that process too, of trying new things, and understanding, because again, the 180 that I did was before, as a young person, just not feeling confident at all to even talk to people, to even have conversations with people, to do a podcast like this, to do an interview like this. No way. No way. There's so, and, just living in California, no way. No, I wouldn't do that, or doing some of the things that I've done in my life. And so, yeah, I think and I think, it could be baby steps at the first, to start off with. It doesn't have to be like, okay, I'm gonna, river raft the Grand Canyon tomorrow. But, it can be, I'm gonna try something new, like, something, as the old saying goes, I'm gonna try something every day that scares you. And I don't know if it's every day for me, but I do believe in that too, of trying different things, and things that you're like, I don't know. Can I do it? You can, maybe. Yeah. But I'm going to try it at least.
So we've seen the beginning. We've seen transformation after transformation after transformation, because that's so common in our lives. That's not a single transformation, but one leads to another and to another.
Yeah.
And I believe that as long as we continue to grow, emotionally, spiritually, there's never an end.
Yeah.
So given those transformations, and given how you have this newfound understanding of yourself, how would you say, what would you count as being your triumphs at this point in your life?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So I think the greatest triumphs for me is, just that idea of transcending limitations, and completely. Yeah, I think, I think you really, hit it on the head when you said that, it has been transformation after transformation. I think, you look at a movie and it's kind of like, okay, this person goes through a transformation, and that's kind of the 90-minute story, and that's the, we tend to think of that as the entirety of their life. And I think that the triumph, the overall triumph for me, is being open to evolving and growing as a person. Because I don't think I can say this one thing happened and that was the triumph of my life. I think it's just being committed to an ongoing process of growing and learning. I love to learn and learning about the world, learning about myself. And so, yeah, I think that is the biggest triumph for me, is just keeping that open mind about the world, about myself. And yeah, because I think that's the kind of thing where taking that to heart, I think gives me kind of a guidepost in life, and and it keeps moving, but it's always like something to shoot for. It's always something to keep in mind, is that I do want to continue to grow, like you said, continuing to grow throughout my life, and understanding that, yes, I know myself so much better than I used to. I love myself so much more than I used to, but also understanding that that's, a point on a continuum where I want to continue to grow. I don't want to ever get to a point and say, okay, well, I'm the Buddha now. I am, I am complete. I've achieved enlightenment. It's something where I think the triumph is continuing towards that goal of growth.
Yep. Yep. It's that open mindset, that growth mindset.
Yeah.
That is so important.
Yeah. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy to maintain that, it does take work. And I think it's, you have to challenge yourself, which, I think, and I kind of referenced that earlier. There's points in my life where I don't think it was a matter of thinking like I had achieved anything, but it's more a matter of getting distracted by life circumstances and kind of losing focus on that idea of growth and believing in my own power to shape my own transformation. And so I think I understand that better now than I used to, that it just needs to be a part of who I am as a person, the continued evolution and the continued search for meaning and truth and what life really means to me. So I'm happy that I have lived enough life to kind of come to some of those realizations.
Well, it has been great, absolutely great to hear this story. I've known you for a number of years, but I learned so much about you here. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I really appreciate your questions. They were very, very thought provoking. And, as I've said when we've talked before, you ask these questions that help me to have realizations about myself that I hadn't before. And those are the best kinds of conversations where, the person that you're talking with helps you shine a light on areas of yourself that you may not have known were there. So I appreciate you for that.
Thank you. There was a science fiction movie called I, Robot. Remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
There's a part where the protagonist, Will Smith, is trying to learn something about this crime that had happened. And there's an AI that he's conversing with. And every now and then the AI would say, "That is the right question." And I really do believe that a lot of life depends on asking the right question.
Yeah. And that's, I think a lot of times life is more about questions than it is about answers.
Yeah.
I think that's an important way to look at it too, is I don't think it's healthy to think you have all the answers. I think it's more healthy to say like, okay, I feel like I know a few things. I have a few guiding principles in my life, but there's still things that I wonder about and I want to explore and find out about and ask those questions. And yeah, I think that's another facet of growing as a person.
Yeah. And, whether you're talking about living in a farm in Iowa, you're talking about living in a larger place in Colorado, you're talking about San Francisco, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
there is so much more to see.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's what I love so much about learning is I'm always learning new things. And there's which is exciting to me because I like to explore the world. And I love it when I come across things. I see a documentary or I listen to a podcast or I meet someone who's had a life experience that I didn't know about or wasn't familiar with. And that's I love that about life. That there's you could learn the entirety of your life and still not know everything. And to me that's really, really enticing.
Yep. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much. And folks, I want to remind you that if you would like to come on this show and talk about a transformation in your life, we would love to have you here. This show is your show. It's for you to talk about what is important to you and how you were able to go from that place of false beliefs to the truth and that transformation, that triumph. So if you would like to do that, or if you have any questions or comments on the show, please feel free to contact me, at zodimiro@gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to entertain your ideas. Let's see. So the only other thing I wanted to add here is if this show resonated with you in any way, please feel free to share it. Right? You can share it from YouTube. You can share it from Facebook. We have so much stuff going on in the New Thought Media Network each month that this is just one small piece of what we do. But it's an important piece. So good to see you here. It's all love. Thank you. Hello, Wayne. Good to see you as well. And folks, I will see you again next month. First Saturday of the month. Much love and many blessings. So let's see if I can actually do this the right way now. And hit the correct button. It would help. Take care.